Well, good morning, church. What type of a shepherd are you? Every one of us, in some way, have people that we are leading. Many of the fathers here will say, well, their flock is their immediate family. I remember very carefully in my mind how the first person that I had to shepherd me spiritually was actually my mother. And so we all have this influence. And, as an older brother, I could say that for many years, I was shepherding my younger brother and so on. Who are the people that you influence, and what type of an influence are you in their lives? See, when it comes to a shepherd, you can be one of two types of shepherd. There was a group touring Palestine, and they were from Scotland. And in Scotland, they have these sheep that are on the highlands of Scotland, and they have to shepherd them in a little bit of a different way from the way they would shepherd them in the flatlands in Palestine. And so this Palestinian tour guide was telling them that, we in Palestine, and I've heard of how you shepherd your sheep, I believe we do a much better job. Because you see, we just walk in front of our sheep. We don't coerce them. We don't shout at them. We don't threaten them or beat them. We just walk in front of them and they follow us. But you in Scotland, you do it altogether different. And he was very disapproving. And the first group of sheep or flock of sheep that they came to as they toured through Palestine, they noticed the shepherd and everybody started to laugh. Because the shepherd was behind the sheep and he was shouting at the sheep and he was cursing the sheep and he was obviously hurting the sheep, and they just couldn't get enough of this. And the driver and the tour guide was really upset, and so they pulled by and they started to berate the shepherd. And he said, no, you don't understand. I'm not the shepherd, I'm the butcher. I'm taking these sheep to be slaughtered. See, we have a problem here when we come to what we've been dealing with in the last few weeks. We have seen how Peter, time and time again, would deny Jesus. Not only when he was denying Jesus at that charcoal fire, which, by the way, is mentioned only twice in the Bible. It's mentioned when Peter was denying Jesus that night, and when he was being asked, do you know him, do you know him, do you know him? He said, I don't know him, and then he even started to take oaths that he didn't know this guy. But it was before that even that we would stop allowing Jesus to go on towards Jerusalem and things like that. So he kept on denying Jesus. Peter, all I want you to do, Peter, James, and John, is stay awake while I pray, because the spirit is strong but the flesh is weak. What does he do? He falls asleep. How many times? How many times did Jesus wake him up? 3 times. And so this is going on, and Jesus is now about to leave the world. He's got 40 days, church. Listen to me carefully. He's got 40 days before he's going to leave them. And in 40 days, he has to change this group of people from being butchers to being shepherds. And it's not an easy task. And today, I don't really want you to think about poor Peter. Yes, we're going to be looking at his life. But I want you to imagine Jesus is talking to each one of us specifically. And I want you to ask yourself, do I deny Jesus? And I think you might be surprised by the answer if you answer honestly. So to get us to be restored and to look at how Jesus focused this restoration, I want you to see 3 things. I want you to see love. I want you to see the feeding. And I want you to see the following. And so when we had the Lord's Supper just now, Robert, and I really appreciate you coming from the Old Testament with that. He showed us very clearly the love, and several times he talked about the love. And we are here because we love Jesus, and Jesus is here because he loves us. But we were also here because of the food, right? And so you have the food, you have the love, and we are here today because we follow Jesus here, as it were. And so all of these 3 things are going to come into play in every aspect of your Christian life. But let's begin by looking at focused love. What does focused love look like? And how can that restore you? Now, normally I would have the text broken up into 3 sections. I can't do that today because we have the first 2 emphases in one section. So you have verse 15 through 17. We're going to have both love and food emphasized here. And then we'll go from verses 18 through 25 of John 21. and we'll look at the last section. So whether you are here today or whether you're watching online, please open your Bibles to the last chapter of the last gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And look with me at John chapter 21, and we'll look at the entire last section, 10 verses, verses 15 through verse 25. We're going to note first love. So when he had finished breakfast, and we'll look at that when we come to food, Jesus said to Simon Peter, now he's got his Hebrew name, he's got his Greek name. Jesus said to him, you are Petros, you know, and on this Petra, this big boulder, I'll build my church. And that was after the confession, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Peter was so into it because he'd been given the keys to the kingdom, and man, he was just it, right? He was just the guy. So Peter is riding the crest, and here Jesus doesn't call him Peter. He calls him like he used to be. Before he was this man who had his life all together. Simon, son of Jonas, if you have the King James, or Simon, son of John. Do you love me more than these? There are three questions that he's going to ask, and each question is going to go from a least question to a middle question to an intense question. He's going to get more and more focused. So he's starting with a very broad question for each one of us here today. Do you love me more than these? Well, what is he talking about? Now, sometimes when we do the Lord's Supper from the New Testament, I remember Ben Painter doing this a time or two. He goes to Matthew chapter 26, verse 26. Well, if you'll just go a few verses on to about verse 35, you'll see something very interesting. Or you can go to Mark chapter 14, and you'll see the same thing there. See, Jesus is going to say to them that you all, every one of the disciples are going to desert me. And Peter's going to say, Lord, even though all of these people, yeah, all of those, but it's actually all of these, even though they all deny you, I will never. And he goes on to say, even if I, and then Jesus predicts what's going to happen. He says, even if I should die with you, I will not deny you. Why is that important? And where does that place us? Do you love me more than these? And so there's a lot of theories. Is he talking about the fish, the 153 fish? Is he talking about the boat that they got into? Or is he talking about his livelihood, his main salary that he gets? What's he talking about? I think he's talking about all of those things, but I think specifically you can't miss the fact that he's talking about compared to these 6 other disciples over here. Do you love me more than these? It's a comparative question. And the answer is real simple in the beginning to answer. And you might say yes. But the reason this is important is because of Matthew chapter 10, around about verse 35 as well. In Matthew chapter 10, Jesus says, if you deny me before men, I will deny you before my Father is in heaven. If you acknowledge me before men, I will acknowledge you before my Father is in heaven. So how important is it that we don't deny Jesus, church? Just think about that. If you deny Jesus in this world, he will deny you before his Father in heaven. How important is it? How big a deal is the sin that Jesus said? This little lady, just the gatekeeper, the ticket collector as it were, just a little young maiden says to him, surely you're not one of this guy's followers? Oh, no, I don't know him. And then he goes in, and Malchus is, the guy who he chopped off the right ear, remember? And being a right-handed person probably, how could he have chopped off Malchus's ear with the right ear? Malchus was probably running away, and he sliced off his right ear. Man, the relative of Malchus says, I recognize you. You one of his, oh no, I'm not one of his disciples. And then probably one of the household of the high priest, probably looking for people to be witnesses, recognized the accent and said, surely you are one of this man's followers. And he even took an oath. How important is it? How big a deal is this sin? And so Peter has to understand here when he says, Lord, you know all things. You know I love you, right? He can't deny. And what Peter's actually doing then, you don't see this easily in the Greek. He is actually admitting, I don't love you like you love me. Jesus is saying, do you agape me? Are you willing to die for me, Peter? And Peter says, Lord, you know all things. You know I really like you. I like you like a brother. I like you with warm emotions and feelings. But this action love that you're talking about, I thought I loved you like that. But you know all things. So here's the deal. Yep, some of you have got it. Some of you are getting it. Don't use Peter's name here. Use your own name. Do you, Neville, do you love me? Do you agape me more than these? And I've got to hang my head in shame and say, Lord, you know all things. You know I sin, Lord. You know how I really try to do the right thing and I mess up. You know that I really like you like a brother. And then Jesus says, tend my lambs, or feed my lambs. Feed my lambs. And then he goes the next time, he says, do you love me? But this time it's not a comparative question. This time it really hits home. It's not more than my work or more than anything else, you know. If you're going to put your hand to the plow, don't look back. It's not that type of a question anymore. Now it's very specific. Are you willing to die for me? And now all the excuses are gone. And again, Lord, you know me. You know all things. You know that I like you, Lord. And then the third time, Jesus says, Neville or Peter, do you like me? Now he's coming down to my level. And this really hurts me because now it's almost like he's given up on saying, are you willing to die for me? And I say, Lord, you know all things. And it grieved Peter because he asked him a third time, do you like me? Do you like me? And he said, Lord, you know all things. How many times do you see the word you know all things over there? I mean, Jesus knows our hearts. And so he said, you know everything. You know that I like you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Why is it important that we focus on love? Let's go back to the Highlands of Scotland, and that's the Highlands in Scotland. Sheep are so ignorant. You know, just the smallest thing can spook a sheep. They will go and eat roots, poisonous roots. They're the only animal I know. I don't know of any animal that will on purpose go and eat something that's poisonous. Sheep will. We will. How many times have we not believed something that somebody told us and it wasn't true? It was not verifiable. And it produced fear. And so we got all excited and we started to, you know, I got something this morning from a family member saying something was posted on your page and it's wrong. Now you must just hold this message and keep your finger held down and then select everybody. I mean, we do it all the time. Fear gets us to do the most ridiculous things. And so that's where we are right now. And these sheep, sometimes they will look down in the Highlands Mountains and they'll see the green grass about 10 to 12 feet away. They've eaten all the green grass around them, but they know that green grass is still there and they love that green grass in the highlands. And so they'll jump 10 to 12 feet down onto a ledge with no way to get back up. What do you think the shepherd does? Not what you think. The shepherd will sit there and wait. They will eat the green grass till there's no green grass left. Then they'll start to get thirsty. Then they'll start to bleat miserably. The shepherd will wait until the bleating has just about subsided and they're almost dead. And they are so steeped in sin that they're being led away in handcuffs to prison. Until they are so desperate that they realize there's nothing they can ever possibly do to save themselves. And it's at that point that love becomes important. And here's the thing I want you to get. You don't have the love inside of you that Jesus is talking about. If Peter didn't have it, don't think that you would have had it if you were in his place. you would have done what everybody else did. You would have denied him. You see, the love that we need is the love that Jesus puts into our heart. When we turn around and we are willing to die for other people, when we are willing to die for his sheep, instead of dividing the church or splitting or causing trouble, when we've got that kind of love, it's a tough love, let me assure you. It's a hard love to have. But when you've got that love, you didn't get it from yourself. Sorry, don't pat yourself on the back. You got it from God. And that is the agape love that we see inside of the Summer Church of Christ, right? We see it inside the Church of Christ all the time. It's a love that you cannot explain. It just goes beyond boundaries. And it's when we realize that, and then Jesus comes and he picks us up because we can't fight him anymore. And he picks up one sheep, and then he goes down and he gets the next one, and then the third one, and he brings all the sheep home. All 153, as it were, sheep are brought up off that cliff. And they're just about dead. That's when he starts to feed them. That's when he starts to restore them. And we need to understand that. So the first thing that you're going to need to focus on is love. The second thing you've got to focus on is feeding. And you can't miss it, right? There's only two important things he's focusing in this scripture. It's loving and it's feeding. So he begins by saying, feed my lambs, then tend my sheep, and then feed my sheep. Why just with the lambs? Well, all you've got to do for little Avery over there is, because she's still a baby, is you've just got to feed her. She's going to come where mom and dad come, right? She's going to do that, I can promise you. She will go wherever they go. But one day, we all grow up and we get to the age of accountability. And then we need to have somebody like Robert to come to our house and to teach us, because we're now growing up and we can now think what's right and wrong, you know. And then we don't need just to be tended, fed, then we need to be tended as well. And the word used there is the word for pastor, but the word pastor is a noun, and so it's the word pastoring. The verb form of pastor is used. Shepherding. I want you to shepherd these people. I don't want you just to feed them anymore. Now I want you to actually give them what is needed to keep them coming and keep them. But then the last word, he goes back to feed them. So how important do you think it is that Jesus is saying now, and I'm asking you as shepherds, I'm asking you as a flock here, how important do you think food is to Jesus? He's the bread of life. He's the manna, right? He's the living water. He's the one that sustains us. It's his body and his blood that we commemorate and we partake of every single Sunday. But is he talking about his body, or is he talking about food as the Word of God? What do you think? Right? And how important is it? How important is the food that we are feeding the sheep? Are we getting our sheep conditioned to sermonettes? Are we getting our sheep conditioned to entertainment? Or are our sheep here because they want to be here? I know that there are people, I know people in South Africa are here today. I know people in the surrounding area that are here today. I know a lot of people who aren't physically here today, but they're with us through the internet. And we all come together in this way because of the food that he gives us. And by the way, if you are in our area and you're participating in the Lord's Supper and you do not have supplies, please let us know. We will get Lord's Supper supplies to you every single Sunday. It's really easy for us to do that. We want to be a flock that eats and drinks together once a week because food is really important. Again, I told you that sheep get spooked real easily, right? Here is one lamb or one sheep because the shepherds took a lunch break in Palestine, and it was actually in Turkey. And they went to eat and they didn't notice maybe a jackrabbit jumped up. For whatever reason, one of the sheep went straight over the edge. 450 other sheep did what? Went straight over the edge. 1,500 sheep did exactly the same thing. The last few landed on soft wool, right? And they survived. That's what sheep do. That's why it's so important for us to have shepherds. You know, sheep need 4 things in order to lay down. And when they lay down, they're okay. They need contentment, they need to be well-fed, they need harmony, and they need to be free from fear. When the shepherd is not there, they start to have conflict. And there'll be one big male sheep ram that'll start arguing with another one as to who's the boss. But the moment the shepherd comes, they settle down. Immediately the argument stops. And they know who's in charge. And so there's harmony. Also, there's fear without that shepherd. There's always bad things looming. Thou walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. Why? Because thy staff, thy rod, because the shepherd is there. They need to be well fed. They get led in green pastures, though you prepare my table before my enemies and so on. They need to be well fed, but when the shepherd is there, they get the green grass. They get the good stuff. And they need contentment. You know, you might not realize this, but little sheep have bugs that are all around them. But the shepherd will come and he'll put a kind of oil on them if they've been bugged or if they have an open wound, and then the contentment will return. If they've got stomach problems, they've got antibiotics and so on, the shepherd takes care of them and they're able to lie down. And if you're a shepherd and if you have a flock, if you have people following you, look carefully at that list. You are the person that gets rid of those things. We have one more thing to cover. And this is probably important because this is the last section. And so let's go ahead and look at following. And again, I want you to look at it as if it is you. Truly, truly, how important is that? Verily, verily, I say unto thee, it's very important. Whatever he's going to say now, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted to. When you are old, Peter, good news for you. When you are old, you're going to die. You're not going to die when you're young. And how are you going to die? When you are old, you will stretch out your hands. What does that look like? Cross. He died on a cross. Exactly right. Very good. When you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry where you do not want to go. A historian wrote about Peter's death. I don't know if it's accurate or not. But he said Peter was chained to a pole for many, many days. He couldn't lie down to sleep. He was just in the standing up position. He couldn't sit down. And the historian continues to say that he taught many people the gospel who were all baptized because of that. And they became Christians. Another will dress you and carry where you do not want to go. Verse 19, he said this to indicate by what type of death. He will what, God? He will what, church? Now, you know how good a news that is. Do you connect the dots? Do you know how good a news that is for Peter? He said, I will die for you. Lord, I can only like you right now. I wish I could tell you I would die for you, but I can't. And yet Jesus does, and he gives him the best news he could possibly have. Peter, in death, you will glorify me. You will not deny me, Peter. Isn't that amazing that Jesus can tell this guy, he's got 40 days to train up these shepherds, and he's telling him you won't be a butcher, you will be a shepherd. And you know what? Are you able to be a shepherd if you've got skeletons in your closet? Yes, one of you have got it. Yes, you can. Why? Because Peter was an elder, wasn't he? Even though this had happened to him, what do we do with people who do that? We crucify them. No, you'll never be an elder again. You'll never get a survey again. No. Not when the Lord's doing the restoration. It's not too late for you, no matter what you've done. Jesus can fully restore you. You need to see that. Verse 18, and after saying these things, he said what? Say it with me, church. He said what? Follow me. Please hear those words, because he's just got those words out of his mouth, and Peter's going to show you how not to follow him. Amazing. Well, we shouldn't be surprised because Peter does that so many times. But this is going to be one of the last times. There'll be one more time that Paul will stand him to the face. But here it says in verse 20, then Peter turned and saw. Don't take your eyes off Jesus. He's just told you, follow him. You know, whenever you compare yourself with another person, you always do it to your advantage. I compare myself to everybody every morning. Do you know that? I look in the mirror as I do my hair, and on Sunday, I even add product. Isn't that great? I add product because that's what people are going to see. Nope, that's what they see. Oh, my goodness. You know, when I look past me and I look at the mirror behind me, I see that. Oh, man. Dwayne, where's that black stuff I can dye my hair? And, she's so tired of telling me she's not going to give me that stuff. I'm not going to dye my hair to cover this bald spot over here. Don't do that. You know, just focus on Jesus. It's not about your reflection to the world. It's about you with Jesus. That's all it is. So he looks around, he sees John, he says, what about that guy, right? Okay, let's look at this. He saw the disciple whom Jesus loved, the one who said at the table when he was doing the Lord's Supper, the Last Supper, he said, Lord, who is that that's going to betray you? When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, Lord, what about this man? Now look carefully here, because this is nice. This is like dessert over here. Jesus said to him, if it is my will to remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. He corrects him. Let's just go back here a little bit. When Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved doing what? What was John doing? He was following. And John will follow Peter as long as Peter's doing what? As long as what Peter's following Jesus. Basically, in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1, Paul says, be an imitator of me as I am of Christ. If I'm not following Christ, don't imitate me. The best thing to do is just look past everybody in this world, because there's no one between you and God except the man Christ Jesus, according to 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 5. So remain, and he says, you follow me. So corrective teaching. Now here's how the church makes a mistake. So the saying spread abroad among the brothers that this disciple was not to die. Yet Jesus did not say that he was not to die, but if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is it to you? You see, we read into the text so many things that's not there. And it's just shameful the way we do it, church. Let's not do that. Let's get the food that comes from heaven. Let's get the manna that comes from heaven. Let's look at what he's saying, not what we think he should say. And then let's follow that. The disciple is bearing witness to this. We know that his testimony is true. Many other things Jesus wrote that is not written in this book. If everything that he said or did was written in this book, the world would not contain the amount of books that's needed. Church, I looked for one closing illustration for you. I want you to imagine, each one of you here that's got somebody that's following you. I want you to imagine you've got 40 days left and you're going to leave this world. Who would you call? Who would you ask to take care of your flock? So I came across this lady. Her last name is Wright, Caroline Wright. She was an author. She wrote a lot. And so she wrote cookbooks. She was doing really good. Top left-hand corner is 2016. She didn't know about the blastoma cancer, where she would have 12 months left to live. She just knew life was perfect. She had the perfect family. Very soon after that, she realized she was going to die. Now, after what they call a miracle, she's still alive. But in the meantime, she wrote 3 books for her children, aged 1 and aged 3, because they wouldn't remember her. She had to do what I'm asking you to do right now. You've got to pick up the phone, and you've got to say, listen, I'm going to leave my children. They're going to be orphans in 40 days. What are you going to tell that person? I know what I would. Love them, feed them, and please get them to follow Jesus. Love them with agape love, with Jesus love. Feed them with the Word of God, the Word that Jesus came to give us. And follow them. Let them follow Jesus. That's what I would tell them. Are you ready for your soul to be restored today? If your answer is yes, please come forward right now as together we stand and sing.